I want you to imagine you just hired somebody. Great resume, interviews well, fast, never takes a lunch, never even calls in sick, works weekends and doesn't ask for overtime. And roughly one out of every 8 things they tell you is just completely made up. Not wrong, made up. Said with total confidence, pricing they invented. A capability we don't offer. A number that is off by a factor of 10 sometimes. And they say it to your client in an email with your company name and signature. How long does that person last? Because every CEO I have ever asked that question has the same answer. And the answer is not 12 months. It's not even 6 months. That person's gone quickly, within weeks, maybe days. So here's my question for you. If you would fire that employee, why did you give that exact profile access to your CRM, your invoicing, your client communication, and then walk away from it? I do not think AI is coming for your team. I really do not. I think it is coming for the worst 2 hours of their day. And I think companies that get that right are going to look untouchable in about 18 months. But the ones that treat it like a new hire and they never have to manage them and it just does everything behind the scenes, they're about to find out what that costs them. Now let's get into it. Welcome back to the Digital Dilemma. I am Nick Dreyfus, Vice President of Business Development here at iNet. The last episode we talked about ROI, and the point I made was pretty simple. Calling it ROI unless it hits the P&L. If you cannot point to the line item that changed, you did not get a return. You did not get a feeling. Now, today is to follow in on that. And the question is, I get asked more than any other right now, and in some version is usually about 10 minutes into the first conversation. It is always framed a little nervously, and it's basically this. Is this thing going to replace my people? And my answer has not changed in 2 years and more. No, not right now, not the way it is being sold to you. And here's what I actually believe. And then we're going to spend the rest of this episode on exactly why, because I have proof to back that up. AI is not ready to be an employee yet. Maybe not for quite some time when quantum computing is here. It's not a person. It's not a hire. It is not something you onboard and then put trust in. What it is very good at right now is taking the repetitive, low value, grinding work off your team's plate and flagging things for a human to look at later. That is enormous. I do not want to undersell that. That is genuinely one of the biggest operational shifts any of us are going to see in our careers. But it is not set it and forget it. It has never been set it and forget it. And every single company I have watched treat it like set it and forget it has ended up in the exact same place, which is a pile of spend and a bunch of half-working automations and nothing on the P&L to show for it. So today, 5 things. 1, the 1 in 8 problem and why it changes everything about how you deploy this. 2, the invoice story, what actually happens when nobody builds guardrails. 3, why most of these deployments fail and why it almost never's AI's fault. 4, what an agentic engineer actually does all day, and I am going to explain this the way I would explain it to somebody who has run a business for 30 years and has zero interest in becoming a technical expert, because that is most of the people I'm talking to. And 5, the part almost nobody's getting right. Not all hours saved are worth the same thing. Some of them are worth a fortune, and some of them are worth little to nothing at all. And if you do not know the difference, you will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars saving the wrong hours. And then at the end, I'm going to lay out your actual choices. Here are 3 of them. One of them is not real, and I'm going to tell you which one. Now let's go. So let's talk about the number, because everything I'm going to say today comes back to this. Depending on the model, depending on the task, depending on whose benchmark you are reading, published hallucination rates for these systems land somewhere between the low double digits and call it around 1 in 8. That number moves. Some tasks are much better. Some are much worse. And it's improving. I want to be straight with you that this is third-party research and not our data. It is a moving target. But hold the number still for just a second and 1 in 8, and just apply your normal hiring standard to it. You would not hire that person. You would not keep that person, and you would definitely not put that person on the phone with your best client. Now, here's what makes it worse, and this is the part I really want you to sit with. A bad employee who is wrong usually is visibly wrong. They hedge, they stumble, they say, "Let me get back to you." And you hear the uncertainty. And that uncertainty is a safety mechanism you have relying on your entire career without ever having to think about it. AI doesn't do that. AI is wrong with the exact same of confidence when it's right. Same tone, same structure, same clean, professional, well-written paragraph. There is no tell. So if you don't have an expert verifying these things, you're going to publish completely incorrect things. So when it invents a price, it invents it beautifully. When it tells your client, we can do something we absolutely cannot do, it says it and reads it off like a spec sheet. When it gets a number wrong in a report that is going to your board, it does not put an asterisk on it. And that is not a technology problem. That's a trust problem. And the trust is the only thing any of us are actually selling. I have said this to owners 100 times. You can serve a system outage. Your clients will forgive downtime. What they do not forgive is being told something that was actually not true, especially about money, especially by a company they were paying to be the expert in the room. So when somebody comes to me and says, "Nick, we're going to roll this out to the whole team next month," my first question is never, "What model are you using?" It is, "Who's checking it?" And if the answer is a shrug, we do not have a deployment. We have a liability with a subscription fee. Now, I'm not saying to not use it. I want to be very clear about that because I run a company that deploys this stuff for a living. I am not the guy telling you to sit this one out. Sitting this one out is absolutely the wrong answer, and it's going to be very expensive, and we will get to that. What I'm saying is you cannot deploy a system that is confidently wrong 1 out of 8 times the same way you deploy a spreadsheet. It needs a different operational model. It needs someone verifying it who's an expert continuously, not just at launch, continuously. That is the whole episode, really. Everything else is just detail on that one point. Now, let me give you the example I use in almost every meeting because it lands with owners in a way that nothing technical does. This is an illustration, not a client story, so nobody go looking. But it is built out of exactly what kind of thing I have watched most companies have happen. Say you decide you are raising prices. Reasonable. Costs are up, everybody's doing it. You want a 5% increase across your client base, and you have an AI handling your invoicing because someone built one last quarter and it's been doing the work just fine. So you tell it, apply a 5% increase. But that 5% increase of what? Over what period? Applied once or applied every cycle? Compounding off a new number or off the original number? You know what I went? It does not. And if that instruction gets interpreted as 5% per day or 5% per invoice run, it compounds. And then nothing in the system is set up to say, "Hey, that number looks insane compared to last month." Then 30 days later, you're not sending out a 5% increase. You're sending something that is an orders of magnitude off, 10,000% maybe, whatever that math works out to be. And here's the part that actually matters. Nobody catches it internally because the system is doing exactly what it was told. There's no error. There is no red flag. There's no alert because nobody wrote the rule that says a number this far outside of the historical range should stop and wait for a human. So the first person who catches it, it's your client opening that invoice. Now think about what that client is thinking about you and how you run your organization. Now think about what that could cost the company. It is not the invoice. You can fix an invoice in about 4 minutes. It's the phone call. It's the client telling 3 other people in their industry association. It is the fact that from that day forward, every single number you send that person is going to get checked twice and scrutinized. because you taught them to check. You did not lose money. You lost the benefit of the doubt. And the benefit of the doubt is the thing that lets you close business without fighting for it. And here's the principle. I do not want to say it plainly. The value in these systems is not intelligence. It's guardrails. Anybody can turn on a model. Anyone can subscribe. The entire job, the real job, is deciding what the system is allowed to do and what is absolutely not allowed to do, and what has to stop and get a human before it goes out the door. Money moving, client communication, client language, anything that touches a number your client is going to read, those need a human in the loop every single time. And that's not a limitation of the technology. That's just good business. If nobody in your building can tell you where those guardrails are, you don't have guardrails. You have an assumption. Now, let's talk about the number that should really scare you. And that is not the hallucination rate. There's a research out of MIT that got a lot of attention recently in the last year. Headlining finding was that something like 95% of these deployments were not producing a measurable return. 95%. I said that in last episode. Again, third-party research, not ours, and people argue about that methodology. Fine. Argue about whether it's 95 or 70. It doesn't matter. Either number should stop you cold. Now, here is the thing that everybody gets wrong about that stat. When people hear 95% failure, they assume that the AI didn't work, that the technology was not good enough, that it was hype. That's not what's happening. Not in what I've seen. What is happening is that these things get built and they work great for about 6 weeks and then they quietly fall apart. And when they fall apart, for the most boring region imaginable, something upstream changed. Your CRM tool pushed an update. Your project management tool changed a field. Your accounting software recognized how exports run. Someone on your team renamed a column in a spreadsheet because it made more sense to them. Any of that, all of that. And the agent was built against an old shape that the data just quietly stopped doing what it was supposed to do. Sometimes it errors out and you know, but a lot of the time it does not error out. It just starts producing something slightly worse and nobody notices for 5 weeks. So now somebody has to go back and figure out what happened. And who's that somebody? In most companies I walk into, it is one guy. It is the operations person who is a little technical and got curious, or it is the marketing coordinator who is good with tools, or it could be the owner's kid who is home from school. And that person has an actual job, and this is not it. So it gets fixed late, or it gets fixed badly, or it gets fixed 3 times, and then that person gets frustrated and quietly stops using it. And nobody wants to be the one to say out loud that the thing we spent 40 grand on is not really running anymore. It's herky-jerky. It's the only way I know how to describe it. It works, then it breaks, then somebody patches it, then it breaks somewhere else. And then it's exactly like every other system in your business that nobody owns. And that is the actual failure mode. It is not the model was not smart enough. It is not that nobody budgeted for the fact that this is a living system in the moving environment, and living systems, moving environments need someone whose job it is to keep the systems alive. You already know who this is, by the way. You know it about your network. You know it about your phones. You know it about your backups. Nobody in this audience thinks you install a firewall once in 2019 and never touch it again. For some reason, the entire market decided AI was completely different. It is not different. It's actually worse because it fails silently and fails politely. So when I hear a company say that we deployed AI last year, my honest first question is it still running the way you think it's running? And a lot of the time, the honest answer is nobody's checked. So this is the part where I lose people. So I'm going to be really careful here because I think it's the single most useful thing in this episode. If you have 30 years running a business and no interest in the technical side, this part is I want you to actually listen to. Because once you understand this, you will be able to tell in about 10 minutes whether somebody knows what they're doing. There's a job title that barely existed 3 years ago, agentic engineer. And most owners have no idea what that person does all day and why they would never pay them for one right now. So here's what they do. Almost everybody who builds their first agent builds it wrong in exactly the same way. They build it so the AI thinks. They set it up to consider the situation, weigh the options, use what it knows, and come up with an answer. It feels right, but that feels like the whole problem. That is what the demo shows you. And this is the single worst thing you can ask it to do. Because the moment it is answering out of its own knowledge, you're getting back 1 in 8. Now you have a system generating original judgment confidently at scale with your name on it. What a good agentic engineer does is close to the opposite. They build it so the system is not really thinking, it's choosing. And here's your set of instructions. Here's what we will try to accomplish. Here is the specific situation in front of you. Now pick A, B, or C. And if it does not clearly see A, B, or C, do not guess. Stop, flag it, and hand it to the person that's in charge of that. That's it. This is the whole craft. Narrow the decision space until the system cannot invent anything, because there is nothing left to invent. Every path is one you've already approved. Let me give you a concrete one. Say you want a marketing agent. The wrong build is, here is our brand, go write a campaign. Now, inventing claims about your business, could be making up statistics. It could be describing capabilities your competitor has and you do not. And it is doing all of it beautifully, polished, on brand, in English that reads in plain English. So somebody who actually knows the product reads it. The right build is different. It is drawing from your approved material, choosing between structures you already signed off on. And when it hits something outside those lines, it flags it instead of filling that gap. Same tool, completely different risk profile, and the difference is entirely how someone built it with guardrails. And here is another one. And this one is the clearest example I have why engineering matters. Accounting is usually where we like to start because it's fast, visible win, and it proves the whole company that this definitely works. Evaluating numbers is something these systems can genuinely be excellent at when they are built correctly. But if it's built wrong, it will round. It will round up, and it will smooth a number because something looks cleaner. And you cannot round accounting. There is no version of your books where rounding up is acceptable. So an agentic engineer building an accounting workflow is explicitly instructing it to never round building in verification on every single figure and setting it up so anything outside an expected range stops to get human interaction. That is not a prompt somebody types on a Tuesday. That is engineering. And when the difference between a tool your controller trusts and a tool your controller quietly stops using. So if you take one thing away from this segment, take this. An agentic engineer is not there to make AI smarter. They're there to make sure it is not making a decision your business can never authorize it to make. They are there to draw the box, create the guardrails. That is a business protection rule that happens to require technical skill, not a technical role that happens to touch the business. And the distinction is why the person you want is very hard to find. So, all right, this is the one. If you have been half listening, come back to this part because this is where most of the money gets wasted and almost nobody talks about it. Everybody's measuring the same thing, hours saved, and it is on the vendor's side. We saved your team 400 hours this year. Great. Where did it go? Because an hour saved is not necessarily a dollar earned. It becomes a dollar only if the person you gave it back to has somewhere for that valuable time to go. Now, let me show you what I mean. And I'm going to pick on accounting again with love, because this is the example I keep coming back to. Say you deploy something that gives every person in your accounting team 5 hours a week back. Real hours, verified. Beautiful. Now what? They're not going to walk out into the sales floor and help the sales team. They're not going to jump into operations and help them work things out. If they're a hybrid role, maybe. But unless they're that, they're not going to generate revenue because that's not their function. It is nowhere in their job description. So what actually happens with those 5 hours? Usually one of three things. They do more of their existing work a little more thoroughly, which is nice, but it's not going to show up anywhere. Or the work expands to fill the time, which is human nature. Or we're now paying for 5 hours a week of capacity you've got no use for. None of those hit the P&L, not one. Now take the exact same 5 hours and give them to sales. What does a salesperson do with 5 hours a week? They make more calls, real calls to real people with actual preparation behind them. They send better emails, not more emails, better ones. They spend time on the deals sitting at the bottom of the funnel that just need a little more attention to get pushed to the close. And now watch what happens to your business. Say your average deal takes 90 days to close. That is pretty typical for a lot of you. Now, because your salesperson has 5 hours extra a week to do those work for those bottom of the funnel opportunities, instead of doing data entry and building their own reports, that 90 days, it becomes 45. Now, how many more deals are you going to close if you cut your life cycle in half? Do the math on your own business. Same team, same headcount, same 12 months, same marketing spend, and you just doubled how many times each rep can take a deal from first conversation to signature. How much happier are sales reps? How much happier is the whole organization because everybody's got a function? That's where you build the automated policy, process, and procedures in the other departments to help that and scale. That's not efficiency, that's capacity. And this is fundamental difference between revenue number out of the same building. Same thing with marketing. Give marketing 5 hours back and they get to run more campaigns. More campaigns feeds more pipeline. More pipeline feeds the sales team that now closes faster, or pipeline that's more targeted, more people higher qualified that get to the middle and bottom of the funnel faster. That will compound. So here's the point. The question is never, where can we save the most hours? The question is, where do we save hours that have somewhere to go? Those are completely different questions, and they produce completely different deployment plans. And the gap between them is where I watch companies burn 6 figures. And this is exactly why I do not think you just need an engineer. An agentic engineer on their own will build you a beautiful, safe, well-guardrailed agent from whatever you point them at. That is their job, and they will do it well. You can either find one or hire a partner that will do that for you. But they're not one who should just be deciding where to point it at. That is a business question. That takes someone who has sat down and understands P&L review, who understands sales cycle, who knows what your gross margin looks like and where the actual constraint in your business is. The value is in the pairing. Engineering that knows how to build it safely, and business judgment that knows which 2 or 3 things are going to be worth building at all. I usually tell people that they have 2 choices here. And I want to correct myself because that is not really the full picture. You kind of have 3. It is just one of them is not really a choice. It's a decision you make by not deciding. Option 1 is do nothing. And I want to describe what doing nothing actually looks like in 2026 because I do not think most owners picture it correctly. Doing nothing does not mean that there's no AI in your company. Your team's already using it. And they're using it on their phones, personal accounts, on free tiers. They get their work done faster because they're trying to do a good job and they found something that helps them. I'm not criticizing them for that. Honestly, that instinct is exactly what you want an employee. But that means the AI in your business is already running. It is just running with no policy, no logging, no guardrails, and no idea what the data is going to go into it. You did not avoid the risk. You just avoided knowing about it. Totally different. So option 1 is neutral. It is the most expensive option and it is just the bill that shows up later. You will not be immediately known for what that is. Option 2, build it yourself. This is completely legitimate choice for some of you and you should make it. You hire agentic engineers, plural, because one person cannot take an entire organization and you cannot point at one of the failures and get something perfect the first time. You embed them with sales, with marketing, with accounting, with operations, because they have to actually understand each department's work to build anything worth having. Then you keep them, which means you're competing for that talent. This is market against everybody. And you're maintaining it forever. Because remember, segment 3, this is a living system and living things break every time something upstream changes. Price that out honestly, fully loaded with benefits, with recruiting, with the ramp time, with turnover risk. For a lot of companies, that number is very real. And if you're big enough, yeah, it's absolutely the right call. But option 3, bringing in a partner who has already the team put together, which is what we built. So I will say this once plainly and then get it out of my way. Fortify AI is our managed AI offering at iNet. And the reason I think it is different is not the models. Everybody has access to the same models. It is that you get an agentic engineering team and the business acumen at the same engagement. The engineering side is what we talked about in segment 4, building it so it is choosing, not inventing. Guardrails on everything it touches, money or a client, never rounding. Verification built in. And then continuously watching it, because things upstream will change and something will break. And that is not a maybe. The business side is what we talked about in segment 5. Sitting down with you and figuring out which of the 2 or 3 workflows actually have somewhere for those hours to go. Not the easiest ones, not the flashiest ones, the ones where time you free up could turn into something that could be hugely impactful to your P&L later. Now, I'm not going to promise you that number. Anybody who promises you a number on anything is still guessing, and you should be suspicious of them. What I will tell you is that we build towards outcomes that show up in the P&L, and we do measure them with you out loud so you can tell whether it's working instead of just our talking word. That is the honest layout. 3 options. One of them is a decision you make by accident. The other 2 are both real, which is the right one depends on your organization and its size, your margin, and how much of this you want to own. So let me come back to where we started. That employee, the one who is fast, never sleeps, works weekends, and makes something up 1 out of every 8 times with total confidence. You would not fire that person, not if you are smart. You would put them somewhere the mistakes can't hurt anybody. You would check their work, you would give them clear boundaries, and you would tell them exactly when to stop and come ask. And over time, as they earned it, you would widen the box. This is management. It is what you have done your entire career with every person you've ever brought on. That is all I'm asking you to do here. AI is not coming for your team. I do not believe that, and I have not believed that once in this whole cycle. Now, it is coming for the worst 2 hours of their day, the repetitive, grinding work nobody wanted to do anyway. And if you handle it well, your people are going to be better at their jobs and happier doing them. If your sales can close double the amount of deals in a year, what's their commission paycheck look like? What does your revenue look like? But it is not an employee, not yet. It is very fast, very confident, very capable systems that need somebody watching it forever. And it needs somebody who understands your business deciding where to point it. If you have that internally, fantastic, genuinely. Go build it and build it right. If not, then you are not choosing between this and not doing this. You're choosing between paying for those supervision on purpose or paying for the lack of it later on a schedule you are not going to be able to control. So here's the only thing I want you to do this week. It's not a call. It's not a meeting. Go find out what AI is already running in your company. Ask your team honestly, no consequences. What are you using and what are you putting into it? Then ask one more question. If I got something wrong, who would catch it? If nobody has an answer to that second question, you found your starting point. That's it. That's the whole assignment. And if you want to walk through what you find with somebody who does this every day, we're happy to have that conversation. Details are in the description, along with free AI usage policy template you can hand your team on Monday. It's a starting point, not legal advice, so you have your attorney look at it before you adopt. I am Nick Dreyfus, Vice President of Business Development at iNet. This has been The Digital Dilemma. If this was useful, please share it with the person in your company who quietly is holding this all together with duct tape. They know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, at iNet, we want to tell you, your team, we want them to focus on growth, and our team is going to make that happen. See you next week. Have an amazing one.